All right, guys, so we're continuing to learn how to solve systems of equations, and in this problem, we're going to learn how to solve that system using substitution, okay? So let's look at that homework question number 6, and even if you're not doing this homework, you'll be able to follow along here. Here on number 6, we have this system, 2x plus 5y equals -7, and 7x plus y equals -8, and we want to solve that system using substitution, okay? So the very first thing that I want to do is show you how to get the answer, okay? So what is the answer to the question? Well, let's jump into a browser, and I will show you exactly how to find the answer. If you go to Mathway, okay, let me make sure you can see that. Yep, you guys can see that. And Mathway, we're just going to type in 2x plus 5y equals -7, and then hit Shift and Enter. It's going to allow you to enter a second line, and you'll type 7x plus y equals -8. For some reason, it's capitalizing all my variables. I don't know why. I guess I had caps lock on. So there's your system. It looks just like the one given to you in the problem. And just click this little arrow and click Solve by Substitution. All right, so there it is. Now it gives you the intersection point, -1, 1. It tells you what x is and it tells you what y is, but it doesn't really show the steps. You know, you can look at a graph and it will show you the graph, but again, that's not substitution. If you want to view the steps, you would have had to subscribe to Mathway's more premium service. It costs $39 a year or $9.95 a month if you're going to pay monthly. Then you can pull up all these steps to show you how to do it, where each step is fully shown in great depth. So that's an option, but at least you can see, like, how do you know if you're right? You know, here's one way to know. If you get to -1, -1, you know you've done it correctly. Another thing that you could do is you could go to Desmos and type that system in there as well. 2x plus 5y equals -7, and 7x plus y equals -8. But just like in Mathway, without having the extra subscription, you couldn't see the individual steps to solve using substitution. But these are two ways that I would go ahead and start, you know, by knowing that when all else fails, I can make sure that I got the correct answer. So at least you can check yourself. Now, as far as doing it on paper, that's what I'm here to show you. You don't have to pay me for a subscription. I'll just show you. We're going to need some paper, some scratch paper to do this. And here's some blank paper here. So the first step is to rewrite the system, all right, because we've just gotten a fresh piece of paper. And this is number 6 from the homework, so we'll write 6. And this would be exactly what I want you to do to turn it in. So our system is 2x plus 5y equals -7. And below that we wrote 7x plus y equals -8. Now you've got options, okay? You could either, what you need to do is solve one of these equations for one of the variables. You can choose to solve for x, or you can choose to solve for y. You can choose to solve the top equation for one of those variables or the bottom equation. Sometimes the equations are equally difficult to solve, and other times there's an obvious choice where one of the equations would be much easier to solve for one of the variables. And this y all by itself right here gives me a hint that I need to be focused in on this bottom equation and solve that bottom equation for y. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. We're going to solve the bottom equation for y. Okay, so to get y by itself, we just subtract 7x from both sides. And on the left, those 7x's cancel out, and I've already got y by itself. So y equals negative 7x minus 8. Okay? Now what do we do with that? Well, we are going to take this right here. So we found that y is equal to negative 7x minus 8. We are going to take that and we are going to plug that in, just this part, back into our top equation, or in other words, the other equation, right? And we're going to plug it in where we see y. So y is equal to negative 7x minus 8. So when I go up to this top equation, I can plug in negative 7x minus 8 right here. And let me show you what that looks like. So this was step 1. Solve one equation for one of the variables. Okay, let me outline that for you. Okay, this was step 1. And we completed step 1 of our mission. Okay? And now we're going to go on to step 2. So step 2 is plug this part up here into the other equation. This is step 2. And what you're going to do is start rewriting the top equation, but don't write the letter y. So write 2x plus 5, and then stop. And you're going to write open parentheses, and that's where you're going to insert this right here, negative 7x minus 8. So you are substituting in negative 7x minus 8 for the letter y in the top equation. Okay, so now we'll put that equals, you just write the rest of the equation now. All of that equals negative 7. And so now what are we trying to do? Now we're going to solve for x. Because we already solved for y, now we're going to solve for x. So the first step is to distribute, multiply this 5 to every term inside this little parentheses here. So we'll just rewrite 2x plus, well, don't write plus, because when you multiply positive 5 times negative 7x, you get negative 35x. Okay, so it wouldn't help to write plus negative, right? Because eventually, in the epic battle between plus and minus, minus always wins. So you might as well just save yourself the trouble of having to erase the plus sign and just go ahead and write minus 35x. Now you have positive 5 times negative 8, and that's negative 40, because 5 times 8 is 40, and you've got that negative sign there. So negative 40. Bring down this equal sign here, and bring down that negative 7 right there. Okay? So the next step is to combine like terms. Well, what terms are like? Well, these terms right here are like one another because they both have the x variable. So what you're essentially doing is you're subtracting these numbers that are in front of the x's. 2 minus 35 is negative 33. Okay, because it's basically 35 minus 2 with a negative sign in front of it. So, but you're not just going to write negative 33, you're going to write negative 33x. So this simplifies to negative 33x minus 40 equals negative 7. Okay, we're on our way. Now, what you want to do is basically combine these terms. Okay, these are called constants because they are numbers all by themselves with no letter. So how do I combine this with this? Well, to get this negative 40 to go over here, I'm going to have to add 40 to both sides. That's the only way to make it disappear on the left side. Okay, so these cancel. And now you're left with negative 33x equals, and so now you have to do negative 7 plus 40. Okay, well, it's positive 33 because 40 minus 7 is 33. Whenever you're trying to figure out which sign to use, look at the bigger number and look at its sign. So the bigger number is 40 and its sign is positive. So when you finally combine these two numbers, the result will be positive. So this is positive 33. And now your final step requires you to get rid of this negative 33 over here. And the way to do that is to keep in mind that in between the negative 33 and the x, there's an understood but invisible multiplication symbol. And so to detach the negative 33 from the x, you have to do the opposite of multiplication, which would be division. And so we're using these little fraction bars to indicate division. And so we'll divide both sides by negative 33. On the left side, I'm able to cancel those two things out, the negative 33s, because anything divided by itself is 1. So what I'm actually doing on the left side when I cancel is I'm reducing this fraction, negative 33 over negative 33. I'm reducing it all the way down to 1. We're just not going to write the 1. So now I have x equals, and now I have to do 33 divided by negative 33. Again, anything divided by itself is 1. So 33 divided by 33 is 1, but there's a negative sign involved. Just one negative sign involved means that the answer is going to be negative. So the answer is going to be negative 1. And you know you're right because over on Mathway and on Desmos, you already knew that x was going to equal 1. So if you were able to get here on your own with the math steps, then you know you're right. You already know you're right. So that's when we're trying to teach you to do this steps at home all by yourself, it's helpful to know when you've kind of succeeded, right? So you know you're on the right track. Now that was step 2. Okay, that was step 2. There's one more step in this substitution process. But let's go ahead and put these steps in boxes so that it's clear to you what we're doing. Okay, so this is solid gold. You found half of the answer. Okay, so if you go up here somewhere, wherever you're going to write your solution, you know your solution to your system is going to take the form of a coordinate pair, and one of those is an x coordinate and the other is a y coordinate. All right, so you found the x coordinate is negative 1. Great, you're halfway there, right? Just like the Bon Jovi song. And now we're going to move on to step 3. Well, what is step 3? Step 3 is to find y. So I guess I should label what the steps are, what we're doing here. So this is solve one equation. Step 1 was to solve one equation for a variable. And that's what we did. And then in the second step here, we solved for x. Okay, in our first equation, we set that thing up where we had y, and then we solved for x by substituting in this expression inside the parentheses where y was. And now in the third step, this is the final step, what you have to do is plug x back in either equation or any equation that you have, okay, and find y, or and solve for y. Well, let's take a look at our page here. I've got an equation right here, an equation right here, and it's fine. You could plug in your x equals -1. You could plug that -1 back in to replace one of these x's right here. But why take the time to do that when you could use this equation where you've already solved for y? All you have to do is plug -1 right there, and there's no more mechanics involved. Y is already by itself. So if you're using substitution, you always want to use this equation to do your final plug-in because you've already solved for that variable. Okay, so now we're just going to write y equals -7, open parentheses, and don't write x, write -1, close parentheses, -8. Now we already know, because we checked Desmos and Mathway, we know that this should come out to -1. Well, let's see if it does. All right, so we didn't do anything to the left side, it's just y equals. Now -7 times -1 is +7. Okay, so just write 7, and then bring down that -8. Now we already know it should be -1, right? Because we kind of cheated ahead of time. So now y equals 7 minus 8. What's that? Well, 7 minus 8 is -1, which is terrific because that's what we know it should be. Okay, remember back on Mathway, the solution to the system was given to us as -1, -1. And here it is, we've just proven it using substitution. So now we showed our work, but we did get some help from Mathway in that we've already verified, what the answer is. So we confirmed what Desmos and Mathway were telling us. And that is what I mean by cheating, okay? That's not really cheating, is it? Because you still went ahead and did all the work. But you got some help in the sense that you know you're right. You already know that when I grade this, I'm going to give you 100 because you already checked that both of those were indeed the solutions for x and y. This is where the line intersects on a coordinate plane, and now you know how to go to Desmos and actually see that. So what I'm going to challenge you to do now, that you know the 3 steps involved, is I'm going to challenge you to solve 7 and 8, and I would recommend start the process off by going to Mathway or Desmos and figuring out what your solution is. So in this sense, if you see the end in sight, you know where you're headed, maybe that will help you in the process. Okay, and then as far as getting the solution, do this 3-step process. So solve one equation for one of the variables, x or y, doesn't have to be the way I did it. Then what you're going to do is plug that in, whatever you get that variable equal to, substitute it in the other equation, and then solve for the other variable. So in this case, I started by solving the bottom equation for y, and I plugged this -7x minus 8 into the top equation for y, and all that was left were x's, so I solved for the x. Then I came over here and I plugged that -1 back into this equation, which is still valid to get me y, and I got y equals -1. Then I wrote those two as a solution to a system. So back on our homework page, all I'm going to write is open parentheses -1, comma, -1, but I'm going to let my teacher know C attached work. All right, so my work is attached. That's okay, because I don't want you to really try to squeeze all of the work like this. This is confusing. I mean, you're free to do that. But this is much more spread out, and it's much easier to identify the steps. And if you made a mistake somewhere, you can show this to me, or quite frankly, anyone that knows mathematics, and we will instantly be able to tell you where you went wrong. And I really want to thank that one student who suggested putting all the steps in boxes and labeling them as the steps, so that when we go look at it again, we know what we did first, second, and third. Okay? Well, I hope this was helpful to you. And when I come back in this final video, I'll show how to solve one of the elimination problems. And that'll kind of close out this whole sequence of videos, won't it? Thanks so much.